This weekend brought the sad and tragic news that legendary artist Akira Toriyama passed away at the age of 68. Although he's probably best known for Dragon Ball, Toriyama also had one foot in the video game world, creating memorable characters for genuine classics like Chrono Trigger and the Tobal series. Perhaps his biggest gaming contribution came as a character designer for the long-running and hugely influential Dragon Quest franchise, a lineup of games so popular that it's practically a holiday in Japan every single time a new one comes out. With all of these loving tributes to Akira Toriyama, it made me wonder what Electronic Gaming Monthly thought of the Dragon Quest series. What was their favorite installment? As it turns out, EGM reviewed a total of 10 games in the Dragon Quest series. About half of those reviews came when the series was still going by the name Dragon Warrior in the West, and the rest is Dragon Quest and its various spin-offs. Unfortunately, as is so often the case when a franchise has been around this long, there are a bunch of titles that Electronic Gaming Monthly just failed to review. But what they did do is they hit most of the classics, and I feel like we have enough here for a fun and surprisingly competitive top 10 list. What we're going to do today is count down the best and worst Dragon Quest games using Electronic Gaming Monthly's own words and scores. There's no editorializing here, we're just going to focus on what the critics said back when these games first came out. I hope you're ready to stumble into a bunch of random battles because that's what happens when EGM ranks Dragon Quest and Dragon Warrior.
I have seen into the future. It is Dragon Warrior. Will you have the cunning, the concentration, the wisdom to puzzle your way to a world beyond imagination? We shall see, won't we? Dragon Warrior from Nintendo, coming soon.
Alright, we're gonna kick things off at number 10 with Torneko, The Last Hope on the PlayStation. Usually, when you hear the term dungeon crawl, it's just a figure of speech for a game where you spend lots of time wandering around dungeons. But with Torneko, I mean it literally. The whole game is a series of randomly generated mazes filled with random monsters and random items. There are a few nice additions here, but it lacks the item combination and companion system that added at least a little spark to Chocobo's dungeon. My main problem with these games is not the plain graphics or the simple gameplay, is that they're just too random. Whether or not you make it through the dungeon has as much to do with luck as strategy. Number 9, Dragon Quest Swords, The Masked Queen, and the Tower of Mirrors on the Wii. Wii motion controls are great when they help to transform complex interfaces into something simple and intuitive. Swords, alas, is the other kind of Wii game. One built on the premise that replacing substance with flailing is a satisfying trade-off. It plays like a dumbed-down Dragon Quest, with a single town and on-rails dungeon, but nevertheless a need to go through the experience point grind for levels. It's too pokey and awkward to work as a new age light gun shooter, too shallow to work as an RPG, and too mediocre to merit attention. Number 8, Dragon Warrior 2 on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Dragon Warrior, Nintendo's wannabe Ultima, was inferior in many ways to the first Ultima, just as Dragon Warrior 2 is inferior to Avatar. Dragon Warrior 2 has faithfully cloned nearly every aspect of the original Ultima. For example, moon gates are now referred to as travel doors. It's a good role-playing game, but why settle for second best? Number 7, Dragon Warrior 3 on the Game Boy Color. It's great to see games like this being redone for the Game Boy Color. I really hope this trend continues with the Game Boy Advance. Unfortunately, while these portable adaptations of classic RPGs are a great way to relive the early days of the genre, they're also a constant reminder of just how far we've come. If it weren't for the fact that you have to walk around aimlessly to build your level up to a ridiculous degree in order to complete the simplest tasks, I probably would have scored this a little higher. We've come a long way. Endless level building is an obsolete play mechanic. Number 6, Dragon Warrior Monsters on the Game Boy Color. Dragon Warrior Monsters may look like the most blatant pokey ripoff since that Monster Rancher cartoon, but you'll find enough subtle differences to make the game worthwhile. For starters, combat is a whole different animal. It feels like more of a traditional RPG. You can even breed monsters. On the downside, Dragon Warrior Monsters suffers from a weak story. It doesn't pull you in nearly as quickly as Pokemon. Number 5, Dragon Quest Heroes Rocket Slime on the Nintendo DS. Rocket Slime is the rarest of breeds. It's a kid's game that completely rocks. Sure, the main adventure is basically a low-carb version of Zelda, but there are two elements that elevate this experience to excellence. One is the brilliantly over-the-top translation, laden with incessant puns and in-jokes that perfectly complement the ridiculous premise. The other? The tactical tank battles, which use the upper screen to transform the standard slime-snapping action into a war game. Angry dudes, beware. You'll encounter more goofy cheer in this one game than most consoles' entire lineups. Number 4, Dragon Warrior 1 and 2 on the Game Boy Color. Dragon Warrior 1 and 2 is like an old favorite couch. Nothing fancy, kinda ratty, and ancient looking, but solidly built with a comfortable, familiar feeling that I love. The story, combat systems, and pretty much everything else is right out of the RPG cliché handbook. It works fine, it's fun to play, and I don't expect the stunning originality of a Final Fantasy caliber experience from the Game Boy. Be warned, the old school character building methods are in full effect here. So if you don't like repetitive combat to strengthen your party, you'll definitely want to pass. Number 3, Dragon Quest IV Chapters of the Chosen on the Nintendo DS. Aside from its PlayStation-style visuals, Dragon Quest IV Chapters of the Chosen isn't terribly different from the game NES owners played years ago as Dragon Warrior IV. But perhaps owning to the series' simple, traditional feel, its humble graphics and familiar role-playing game mechanics feel more at home on the DS than its more daring contemporary Final Fantasy IV? Or maybe it's just that rather than focusing on the melodrama and innovation, Dragon Quest is about creating a well-defined cast of characters in an open world full of mysteries and then setting the player loose to find their way. Dragon Quest has always been a stolid counterpoint to Final Fantasy. Predictable, but full of heart. This remake won't wow anybody with its looks, but give it a chance. It will win you over with its personality. Number 2, Dragon Warrior VII on the PlayStation. The best-selling Japanese PlayStation game looks like this? Yep. In order to appreciate Dungeon Warrior 7, you simply must look past the squatty characters and chunky dungeons. Still with me? Good. Now, look instead at the infinitely complex job system, unconventional story, and the daunting 100-hour quest. That's not a typo. While most RPGs end by the 40-hour mark, in Dragon Warrior 7, you're just scratching the surface. The hardcore difficulty might scare some away, but if you're looking for an RPG that truly feels like an epic adventure, this is it. And finally, at number 1, it's Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King on the PlayStation 2. Dragon Quest VIII is so freaking big that it's almost like the dandy RPG fans' answer to Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And it's proof that taking an old school gaming formula and giving it a dazzling facelift can actually work. Dragon Quest VIII may play like it's 1995, but it's also easily one of 2005's best looking PlayStation 2 games. On top of 60 plus hours of questing, you also get neat side quests like casino gambling, monster training, and item creation. Even the game's very, very British voices are a hoot! Newer RPG fans may complain about the constant turn-based battle and slow-paced leveling, but no matter how you feel about the gameplay, Dragon Quest VIII will certainly be the longest RPG in your collection. Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we have a whole playlist full of episodes just like this. We cover Final Fantasy, Phantasy Star, Mario, Sonic, Bonk, Castlevania, Resident Evil, Metroid, Ghosts and Goblins, Burnout, Ridge Racer, and so many more. I'm telling you, we have more than 60 of these episodes, so give it a binge when you have a chance. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Dragon Quest game? I'm excited to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back on Tuesday with a review of that upcoming Llamasoft compilation. Well, maybe. You see, seeing how the embargo lifts at 12 midnight on the East Coast, it's technically going to be 9 p.m. Tuesday night over here on the West Coast. So either it's going to be the late night or the early morning for you. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,